Welcome, everybody. Today we are going to be learning about an episode from Parashat Beha'alotcha, which we read a couple of days ago, and the title this year is The Mystery of the Kushite Woman. I was tempted to call it The Hardy Boys and the Mystery of the Kushite Woman, but there were copyright issues, so I'm just gonna... But before getting started, there's...
1927 edition. I have all the Hardy Boys. At least
Wow.
1927
I bet you don't
edition.
have that one, though.
But just as a word of warning, you should be aware, though, because this word is going to come up a lot, as it is in the title this year. In modern Hebrew, the word kushi is actually a very derogatory term. And it's a term that people have gotten in trouble for using. Actually, fairly recently, someone got into some hot water for using it. So, but biblically, it just means a person from the land of Cush. So it certainly has the connotation of a dark-skinned person, and we're going to get into that. But because the word comes up so much in all the unfortunate word we're using, just please bear in mind, first of all, that the way we're using it is simply in the ancient biblical Hebrew sense. And second of all, you should be aware, if you're visiting Israel, that in modern Hebrew, this is a problematic term. So that's just sort of a little public service announcement.
The chief rabbi.
All right, we don't need this. If we want to, everyone.
All right.
We don't. Considering that to some degree the entire class is a little bit of a warning about Lashon Hara, there's no need to start out that way.
That was a terrible statement.
Okay, so.
Would you just clarify briefly, since you said that, what's the right word?
I actually do not know what the proper...
For what?
What's the right word, Elliot?
For what?
For, let's say, an Israeli of Ethiopian descent or an Ethiopian Israeli even. I actually do not know what the proper term is. But, thank you. So that's a good question. All right, we'll reserve it, and I will ask around, and I'll see if I have an answer for next week.
Kumar and email him so he can email us.
What about shachorim?
I have absolutely no idea. So,
On to the biblical meaning.
so let's start out with our plan of attack. So our plan of attack for the day is as follows: we are going to read the episode. The episode is not that long, and we are going to raise a bunch of questions. And step one is going to be basically we're going to try and see how various different Meforshim, 4 different Meforshim, answer one of those questions. Not simply so we can get an idea what the playing field is like, although that's going to be useful information, but also we're going to try and see what does that tell us, how this sort of typifies the various approaches that these rabbis have, these Meforshim have, to the study of Torah and to the study of Tanakh. And then what we're going to do at the end, the second half, hopefully we will have time, is that we're going to try and take an approach to possibly how we can address the many other questions that we're going to raise. So with that, Dr. Shari, you want to start us out? Source 1, let's read the story.
Miriam and Aaron began criticizing Moshe on account of the Kushite woman he had married, for he had in fact married a Kushite woman. They said, "Is it true that Hashem has spoken only with Moshe? Hasn't he spoken with us too?" Hashem heard them. Now this man Moshe was very humble, more so than anyone on earth. Suddenly Hashem told Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, "Come out, you 3, to the tent of meeting." The 3 of them went out. Hashem came down in a column of cloud and stood at the entrance to the tent. He summoned Aaron and Miriam, and they both went forward. He said, "Listen to what I say. When there is a prophet among you, I, Hashem, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. But it isn't that way with my servant Moshe. He is the only one who is faithful in my entire household. With him I speak face to face and clearly, not in riddles. He sees the image of Hashem. So why weren't you afraid to criticize my servant Moshe?" The anger of Hashem flared up against them, and he left. Continue.
Sure, pass it on, whichever you prefer.
When the cloud was removed from above the tent, Miriam had sarat, as white as snow. Aaron looked at Miriam, and she was as white as snow. Aaron said to Moshe, "O my Lord, please don't punish us for this sin we committed so foolishly. Please don't let her be like a stillborn baby, with its body half eaten away when it comes out of its mother's womb." Moshe cried to Hashem, "O God, I beg you, please heal her." Hashem answered Moshe, "If her father had spit in her face, wouldn't she hide herself in shame for 7 days? So let her be shut out of the camp for 7 days. After that, she can be brought back in." Miriam was shut out of the camp 7 days, and the people did not travel until she was brought back in.
Okay, so very clear. Everybody completely understands what's going on. No questions. We're done. We can move on. Yeah, no. All right. Anybody any questions for us?
Why didn't Aaron get any?
Okay, that's a really good question. Miriam gets punished.
Why did Aaron?
Aaron doesn't get punished. It seems like Miriam and Aaron are both speaking against Moshe. So what's going on? Why is Miriam punished and Aaron isn't? Yes.
The text says that Moshe was the most humble of men, yet most midrashim say Aaron was the most humble of men.
I'm not familiar with any midrashim that say such a thing, but again, that we're dealing with the text here. Our question is, based on this text, what is it? What questions do we have?
What's the connection?
Okay.
What's the connection between the first pasuk and the second pasuk?
Okay, right? That's a really good question. We have this whole thing, okay, they're talking about this Kushite woman, right? Let's imagine we sort of took that part out, right? Outside the first couple of words. Miriam and Aaron began criticizing Moshe, and then we skipped the rest of that pasuk. They said, isn't it true that Hashem spoke only to Moshe, right? And then we read the rest of the story. Nothing's missing, right? It's what's going on. Sort of there's this statement in the middle of the first pasuk about how they're talking about this Kushite woman, and then the issue never comes back again. We never hear again about any Kushite woman. Like, what's going on with that little piece there? It seems odd. Anything else?
Is the Kushite woman referring to Zipporah or not?
Who is this Kushite woman? Right?
Never heard of
What? We never heard from her before. We never heard from her again. Right? What is going on? What is the story with the Kushite woman? Okay. Anything else? Any other things that bother people? Any other problem people have?
Well, what's the problem here? Why are they even complaining? What's the
Right.
issue?
This is Miriam and Aaron. Why are Miriam and Aaron criticizing Moshe? Right. That seems like and especially like here and now, just all of a sudden, out of the blue, Miriam and Aaron start talking smack about Moshe. Why are they doing that? Okay. We got anything else?
Well, where did he find a Kushite woman?
Well, there's a very simple answer to that, I think.
In Kush.
The hint is in the question.
Well, yeah, but it's not nearby.
Okay, that's true, right? So that's okay. I think that goes into the whole question of, who is she and which, but okay.
Is there significance to the particular punishment that Miriam receives?
Okay, yeah.
What is
I mean, there's the tsarat, and then there's Hashem's statement about if her father had spit in her face, she would be humiliated for something. That's not sort of what we were expecting, I think, and it just is a little bizarre. What's going on with the whole face spitting thing? Okay, what else? We got anything else? Any other questions? Okay, yes.
Okay, so what are they asking? How did they feel left out if they said, is it true that Hashem has spoken only with Moshe? Okay, but then it said, hasn't he spoken with us too? So what do they expect out of this?
Right. I mean, I think that sort of goes into the question of what are they doing? Why are they saying this? What exactly is the problem? Right. It doesn't seem
Yeah, it
like
doesn't say
there was an
anything.
event that led to this. It just seems like it's sort of.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And one issue I would add, if you look underneath source 2, by the way, so we listed the questions. I think those are the questions that you had are the same questions that I had. The one thing I would add is this is not some sort of throwaway story. It's a few psukim. They tell us this thing happened, and then we sort of move on. This is actually a really important story to the point where we actually have source 2. George, I think we're up to you. Source 2? Yeah, source 2, it's right underneath source 1.
Remember what Hashem, your God, did to Miriam on the road after you left Egypt.
Right? We actually have a commandment to remember this. Right? In Devarim. Right? So, in the next book, right, in case you have forgotten about it, thought that, it was just some sort of throwaway story, all sorts of big, major, important stories happened, God commands us to remember this thing that happened.
Is that listed ever as one of the 613?
So in general, we have what's called the Sheish Zechirot, right? The 6 times when we're commanded to remember things, whether or not all of them constitute a mitzvah. I don't think anybody specifically lists them separately, but we do have, some people have the custom to say the Sheish Zechirot, right? The 6 things that you're supposed to remember every day after davening. Some people do have that custom. I think it's listed in the Art Scroll Siddurim, I think a couple of other Siddurim. I don't know if it's generally listed as an independent mitzvah. But still, right? This seems to be really important. So what is going on with that? So what we are going to do for the first half of this class is we are going to try and focus on the question of who is this Kushite woman, right? What is going on? We're trying to identify her, and then we're going to look at 4 approaches. We're going to look at Rashi, we're going to look at Rashbam, we're going to look at Ibn Ezra, and we're going to look at Ibn Kaspi. And then after that, we're going to try and say, what do these approaches tell us about their view of Pshat, of their view of how to view the text. And then we're going to try and take an approach to try and answer the rest of our questions. Okay, so let's start out. How does Rashi deal with this question, the Kushite woman? And I think we're up to you.
Kushite woman, Moshe's wife, was a Midianite, not a Kushite. But scriptures teaches that everyone acknowledges beauty just as everyone acknowledges a Kushite blackness. Kushite is the
That's a
mental
stretch.
value is equal to beautiful appearance.
Ah.
Miriam and Aaron spoke. Well, by Nathan says, Miriam was beside Zipporah when Moshe was told that Eldad and Medad were prophesying in the camp. When Zipporah heard this, she said, "Woe to their wives if they are required to prophesy, for they will separate from their wives, just as my husband separated from me." From this, Miriam knew about it and told Aaron. Now, if Miriam, who did not intend to disparage him, Moshe, was punished, all the more so someone who intentionally disparages his fellow.
Okay, so, right, Rashi's approach, this is very complimentary to Tzipporah, and, Kushite means that she's very beautiful, etc., etc. And what happened was, all she was doing was mentioning to Aaron, by the way, I heard that Moshe has separated from his wife because of prophecy. And they were very confused about this, and they were saying, well, we don't have to separate from our spouses, and we're prophets, right? And, even though she wasn't intentionally disparaging Moshe, because, this might have been taken as disparagement, so she's punished.
That's
Now-
Medrash?
So right, Medrash Tanchuma. He's quoting Medrash Tanchuma, not from this parsha, from Parshat Saf. But anybody got a problem with this? Anybody like this approach? Anybody really not like this approach? Indifferent to the approach? Okay, go ahead.
Doesn't it say, I don't have the Hebrew in front of me, doesn't it say they were criticizing Moshe?
It says they were speaking bi Moshe, so they were speaking in him or about him. But clearly, right, what's the best proof that they were criticizing him is.
That Hashem gets.
But Hashem gets really mad. Specifically, says Hashem gets mad. Hashem punishes them, right? So that's a bit of an angle there. But Rashi seems to be saying, no, they really weren't doing anything bad. But when you're at tzaddik and you're on that level, etc., etc., so Hashem's got an itchy trigger finger. Now, for the rest of us, less so. But when you're that close to Hashem, right, even the most minuscule of flaws will appear much greater. Okay, so we have Rashi's approach, right, which is based on the Midrash, which basically says, everybody is basically a good guy, but there's this minor flaw, and then so it gets punished. Okay, next approach.
Is there any support for that midrash that Zipporah was next to Moshe when he was told about Eldad and Medad?
So that's an interesting question, right? Well, our rule about midrashim is midrashim are always, always, always based in the text. It's never just something that came out of nowhere, right? I mean, if it's a received, ancient, then we're told it's received in ancient. Otherwise, it is based on the text. So let's bear that in mind. We're not going to answer that right now, but we will, God willing, get back to that. Where is the trigger in the text? I believe there is. We'll get back to it. Okay, approach number 2, Rashbam.
Two. As written in the Chronicles of Moshe Rabbeinu, he ruled over the land of Cush for 40 years, and took one solitary queen, but did not lie with her, as it is written there. But they, Miriam and Aaron, did not know, when speaking of him, that he had not had relations with her. For if it was on account of Zipporah that they were speaking, why would the Torah write, for he had taken a Cushite woman? And do we not know that Zipporah was a Midianite woman and not a Kushite?
Okay, so Rashbam with a little elbow there to Grandpa, right? Rashbam is the grandson of Rashi. And what does he say, right? He says, who is this Kushite woman? It's a Kushite woman, right? It's a princess from the land of Cush. And Moshe ruled over the land of Cush for 40 years. That it is written in this book that, we have it. It hasn't been lost to us. But, it's called the Chronicles of Moshe Rabbeinu. A lot of people don't, canonize it in terms of midrashim, right? They wouldn't necessarily cite to it. They don't necessarily accept its reliability, but Rashbam apparently did. And Rashbam said, it says in this book that Moshe was in Cush for 40 years and he ruled over them and he took a wife. And so what happened was, right, he took a wife, but he was never with her, right? He took her for, public appearances purposes. And so, but Miriam and Aaron didn't know this, and they found out about this whole Kushite princess wife thing, and they were upset, or at least they were talking about it, and because they didn't have the whole story, and so Hashem was saying, I'm punishing you because you were choshed on Moshe, right? You shouldn't have suspected Moshe of doing something wrong. All right, what do people think about this? Yes, no, like it, don't like it?
First of all, why would it have been wrong, if he took this wife, why would it have been wrong for him to sleep with her? And second of all, why does Rashbam feel so sure that he didn't? Like, I guess I don't understand.
Well, Rashbam was just quoting that part, right? He took the queen, never lied with her. That's part of the Chronicles of Moshe Rabbeinu.
These chronicles are midrashim?
So, I mean, they're certainly midrashim in the sense that they're extra textual. The question is, right, there are many, many stories, because, as for the life of Moshe, we're missing huge chunks of the life of Moshe, right? What did he do during those years? So there are books that talk about what Moshe did during those years, and Rashbam seems to be citing this one as authoritative. As I said, other Perushim are not so comfortable with that idea.
Well, I guess the question is, if they knew that he had this wife, why would it have been considered disparaging for them to have been talking about that? Like, I don't understand why they would have been punished for talking about it.
Okay, so it seems like what Rashbam says, what Rashbam is implying is that they're saying, oh, he married a Kushite woman, meaning not a Jewish woman, and he was having relations with her, and that was highly inappropriate. Right? It's inappropriate for a Jewish man to have relations with a non-Jewish woman.
But it's not inappropriate for him to marry her as long as they're not sleeping together.
Right. In other words, meaning the idea being, and again, none of this is halacha l'maaseh, but the idea being that so if you're saying for the purposes of figurehead, in order to cement your rule for whatever reasons, you need to quote unquote take a wife, but you never actually touch her.
And that's okay.
Right. Right. So in the eyes of Judaism, in the eyes of Hashem, you haven't even done anything. Right, there's no kiddushin. Yeah. So, okay.
But his sister and brother thought that he was sleeping
right. The
with
second
her.
thought that
because Zipporah was left alone.
Oh well, Zipporah's not in the picture at this point.
No, right, but I mean.
But they were just saying prior to him meeting and marrying Zipporah, they thought that he had married and had been living as man and wife with this other woman, and they thought that was inappropriate. Zipporah? Right, before Zipporah. This is for 40 years before he comes to Midian. Because Moshe is a young man when he runs away from Paro, and he's 80 years old when he comes back to Egypt, and so we're missing, 40, 50, 60 years of his life. So what happened during that period of time? Okay, so second approach, and we'll do a little bit of analysis of this approach in a couple of minutes. Approach number 3, which is 5, Ibn Ezra. Professor Schlagman?
There are those who say Moshe was king over Cush and took a Cushite woman, and the Mitargum Onkelos says Kushite means she was beautiful, and Kushite is a term of respect, the Ishmaelite term for white skin. Just as we call a blind person one with sufficient light, but it does not make sense that the term is complimentary. The opposite, it is denigrating. And what I believe is correct is that the Kushite woman is Zipporah, for she was a Midianite, and the Midianites are Ishmaelites who dwell in tents, and because of the heat of the sun, they have no whiteness at all, and Zipporah was black and similar to the Kushite woman.
Okay, so what's Ibn Ezra's approach? Right, who's the Kushite woman? It's Zipporah. Very similar to Rashi, yes? No.
He's saying it was derogatory.
Exactly, right? Rashi was saying, oh, everybody was being so nice and nobody was meaning the same thing. Ibn Ezra was like, no. Right? They were insulting Moshe's wife. What they were saying was mean. And as a result, they were punished. Yes?
Don't you think Moshe and Zipporah had children?
Yes, they did.
So that doesn't contradict what there's just before you read, well, he didn't really lie with.
No. This was this Kushite princess woman who he never was with.
But if it were one and the same.
Yeah, if she were.
Right. Well, Ibn Ezra doesn't.
She was white. She was.
Oh yeah. Well, Ibn Ezra is not accepting any Kushite princess thing. Right. There's two different things going on. There's Rashbam who says there's two women. One of them is this Kushite princess who he never laid with, and the other is his lovely wife Zipporah with whom he had 2 children. And then there's Ibn Ezra who says, no, there's no Kushite princess. There's no Moshe ruling over Kush, right? This is an unreliable source that we don't quote and we don't accept. What happens is it says there was a Kushite woman. We know he married a Kushite woman. We know he married Zipporah. The Kushite woman and Zipporah must be the same person. And what they were saying is they were saying something very mean about the fact that Zipporah was from Midian and they dwell in tents and they're exposed to the sun and their skin is much darker. And she was making fun of her on that account.
So then we don't know if he married somebody 40 years before. That's just.
So Ibn Ezra says that there's no source for that, right? The only source that Rashbam is quoting is an unreliable source, and we don't accept that.
Well, who wrote the Chronicles of Moshe?
So we don't really know that. That's an issue, but right, the source itself claims to be very ancient, but many sources claim to be very ancient for exactly that reason. So. Okay, now the next source we're going to read is Ibn Kaspi. I'm actually going to read this one, but I should tell you right now, Ibn Kaspi is not for the faint of heart, right? If you are of a particularly delicate disposition, from a philosophical standpoint, this isn't rated R. From a philosophical standpoint, if you are of a delicate disposition, you should turn away now because he does not mince words. So I'm going to read this, but steel yourselves accordingly. So this is Rashbam in the Mishnah Kesef. So he writes, on account of the Kushite woman he took, says Yosef, right, says me, Ibn Kasbi writes, I am filled with wonder at the words of the previous ones who are greater than me, and I do not approach their feet. How they could have come to explain the Torah in a way opposite from what is written. As they take the verse, and he took a Cushite woman to mean he divorced or he distanced himself from a Cushite woman. And if this was the intent of the Torah, why would it not have been written thus? Why would it be written as the opposite? And further, who permitted us to do such a thing? Why would Onkelos have such great power to do so? Or the sages of the Talmud or Ibn Ezra who agree to this understanding? Why wouldn't everyone do this? Each person interpreting the text as he says fits in his eyes, until we have changed, and you shall love Hashem your God, to, and you shall hate Hashem your God. And if you were to say, Torah was given at Sinai and passed down to Yoshua, and this was the oral tradition of the verse, then return to my original question. Why did the Torah not write the word that was meant, and instead use a word which means the exact opposite? Can you call it a commentary on the words when you reverse their meanings? And then why not interpret, and God has taken you for a people, to mean God has rejected you? And what is the difference between that understanding and this interpretation here? Woe unto me that I should do such a thing, to entirely abandon the Torah of Moshe and cling to a new Torah, or to do as they have done, God forbid. And so I say that the explanation of what is written here, according to the basic understanding of the Hebrew language, is that Cushite woman means a woman from the land of Cush, and took her means he clung to her, for that is what the word lakach, to take, means. And the incident is thus. After marrying Zipporah, Moshe took another wife, one from the land of Cush, for reason known only to himself, and it's not for us to ask why, for it was done in wisdom, and we do not know if it was done now or earlier, for the Torah does not tell us. Okay, so what do people think about Ibn Kasbi?
I like him.
I want to know what he says about the people he doesn't respect.
Ibn Kasbi, by the way, loves Ibn Ezra. And Rambam, he's a big Talmud of the Rambam, and he's a big Talmud of Ibn Ezra, loves Ibn Ezra, wrote a whole book just on Ibn Ezra, right? Ibn Ezra, like many of the Perushim at the time, would write things frequently like, and this is a great secret, and only the deepest of understandings, the wise with the deepest of understanding can understand what is written here. So you write these things along these lines, and then sort of call it a day. And Ibn Kasbi wrote a whole book just saying every time Ibn Ezra says this is a secret, here's what the secret is, right? And he actually got in trouble for this. He got in trouble for this because people.
Spoilers.
Right, it's not just a book of spoilers. There are people like there's a reason why it was a secret. Right, which is interesting. We'll actually get back to this idea in a second. It's an ancient idea where people are criticized for doing exactly what Ibn Kasbi did. But, right, what do people think about Ibn Kasbi?
Pardon my ignorance. I never heard of him until just now.
Okay.
When did he live and where did he
Yosef
live?
Ibn Kasbi is Middle Ages. I want to say 1300s. It might have been 1400s.
Where?
And I believe Spain. So. But I'll have to double check that. I'm not 100% sure.
I can check.
I guess I'm a little unsure why he's so sure that he married this Cushite woman after Zipporah, as opposed to what the other opinion was that he had the Cushite woman before Zipporah. On what basis is he saying the
Because he's
reverse?
saying, right, what happens? It's telling us now, right, it told us before Moshe got married, it told us before Moshe had kids, it never said anything about Cushite woman, never said anything. And now all of a sudden it's saying, Aladod Hayisha Kushita Sharlakach. And Rashbam is saying there's this thing about he ruled in the land of Cush for 40 years, and there was a princess. What princess? What 40 years in Cush? That's nowhere in the Torah.
So he's implying that it's chronological here, whereas we know the Torah often isn't.
Right, not just chronological, but he's like, he doesn't specifically address Rashbam. He's mostly addressing the approaches of Rashi and Ibn Ezra. But he said, I think what will be clear from his words in terms of taking things out of the text was that you can't just interpolate a whole story about Moshe, going and ruling in Cush for 40 years and marrying a princess when there's no textual basis for telling us that any of that happened. If it says he married a Cushite woman, what does it mean? It means he married a woman from Cush. That's what it means. Okay, so I think it's interesting to see how I think these four opinions are really a pretty good reflection of the attitudes and approaches that these particular rabbis have towards the Torah interpretation in general. So what do we start out? We start out with Rashi. So first of all, when Rashi is giving his explanation, what does Rashi quote? Rashi quotes a Midrash. Rashi almost always is quoting Midrash. But it's not any Midrash, right? There's tons and tons of Midrashim. What Midrash does Rashi quote? Rashi quotes a Midrash that makes the good guys look really good, right? Even though it's a particularly sticky situation, right? What's Rashi's attitude here? Rashi's attitude here is, oh no, you can look at this and Miriam can come out of this looking bad, Aaron can come out of this looking bad, potentially even Moshe can come out of this looking bad. So, what do we have to do? We have to explain, right? Really, Aaron is really a good guy. Really, Miriam is a good guy. Really, Moshe is a good guy. And so what Rashi does is Rashi takes the path, the clearest path, the path which explains everything that's going on, answers all of our questions without raising theological red flags. Right, without causing anything that's going to cause people to say, "Oh no, right? This is impugning the honor of our patriarchs and matriarchs." And this is fairly consistently Rashi's approach to the Torah. Okay, Ibn Ezra. Rashbam. Wait, what's Rashbam's approach? Rashbam is very, very interesting. Rashbam takes Pshat very much as is, right? He's trying to understand what's going on in the words, which is why he says a Kushite woman must mean a Kushite woman. But Rashbam also is interested in external texts. In other words, what Rashbam is saying is you can't just look in the Torah as sort of a closed canon. What you need to do is you need to understand all the other things that are going on. And in this particular case, he's reaching for a non-Torah source. And when I say non-Torah source, I mean, right, not from the books of Tanakh and not from the standard Midrashim, right? He's reaching for a book which is a book of folklore, right, which claims to be very ancient and apparently had some sort of tradition for, right? But he's reaching for that because he's saying, even though this creates more of a problem theologically, at the end of the day, right, we seem to have this, in the opinion of Rashbam, valid source that says Moshe was in Cush for 40 years. It said he married a Cushite woman. All of a sudden here, there's a story about him marrying a Cushite woman. Right? Obviously, one must be related to the other. Oh, well, the fact that he married a Cushite woman is a little bit strange. And the fact that Miriam and Aaron are talking about it in negative terms makes them look not so good. Right? Not horrible, but it makes them look not so good. That's not Rashbam's concern. Right? Rashbam's trying to explain what's going on. Ibn Ezra, what does Ibn Ezra say? Right? Ibn Ezra doesn't care about the theological implications, right? He's saying, right, you look at the text, what's going on? What's going on is clearly Miriam and Aaron are saying things about Moshe, and it seems like they're insulting, right? It must be that what they're saying is insulting because they get punished, right? If what they're saying is insulting and they get punished, our job is to figure out what the insult is. And if they're calling Moshe, the woman that Moshe took, a Kushite, what does it seem like the insult is? Right, we know that she's from Midian, which is fairly far south, and we know that, the further south you are, the darker your skin color is a general rule. They're calling her a Kushite. What does that mean? Right, it means they were making fun of her skin color. Right, and Ibn Ezra is not at all concerned with the fact that, but this means that Miriam and Aaron seem to be doing something inappropriate. Okay, the Torah says they did something inappropriate, so I'm going to explain to you that they did something inappropriate. What's Ibn Kasbi's approach? Ibn Kasbi's approach is that plus, right? Right?
It's going to outshot Ibn Ezra.
Right, exactly. He's saying, what's going on here? Is it right? It's all very fine and good what you're doing, Ibn Ezra, except, right, you're ignoring what it actually says in the text. Right? You're going around trying to use a very convoluted way to get around saying Moshe married a Cushite woman. Why? Because you're theologically uncomfortable with it. Right? He's a little bit calling some hypocrisy on Ibn Ezra here. He's basically saying, Ibn Ezra, you're perfectly happy to say that, oh no, we have to deal with Pshat, we have to give, only use what the words give us. But then when it says Moshe took a Cushite woman, you're super duper uncomfortable with that. So all of a sudden you're saying it means the exact opposite of that. And that's why he goes on this giant rant and he's very upset and he's very angry because he's saying, look, we learn what's right and wrong from the Torah. If you're coming from a standpoint of saying, well, this can't be what the Torah means because it's wrong, your values are all reversed. And then you have what he writes, Ish kol hayashar beinav. You just have everybody doing whatever they want. I come from the lens of saying XYZ is good. Oh, the Torah says XYZ is bad. It means the opposite of that. You can't do that, right? You need to get your values from the Torah. You don't take your values and apply them to the Torah. Right? And Ibn Kasbi says, come what may, that's the approach we're going to take. So I think it's just worth noting, right? You have 4 different, and by the way, this may be the reason why you haven't heard about Ibn Kaspi until today, right? People are reluctant to quote him, right? Many people are very, very uncomfortable quoting him. Even in his day, he was a controversial figure. Some people loved him, but other people, not so much. Okay, so I think we have 4 different approaches. What we're going to do now is we're going to try and, in the last 10-15 minutes of this class, we're going to try and understand the answers to some of our other questions. Basically, taking the approach, right? We're going to assume, and like I said, there's different approaches, you don't have to assume this, but we're going to assume that when it talks about the Isha Kushite, it is in fact talking about Tzipora. Now, why would I say that, right? It's not just that, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that, Moshe took a second wife, or he just randomly took a woman from Cush, right? Like, there weren't enough daughters of Israel, right? Which is true, I am uncomfortable with that idea. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, it just means I'm uncomfortable with it. But I think there's actually valid textual reason for saying that this woman is Tzipora, and it actually helps explain why this story is where it is, right? What story did we have about a chapter or so earlier? Source 7. Sam, I think we're up to you. Source 7.
Moshe said, Kabal, the son of Moshe's in-law. We are traveling to the place about which Hashem said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well, because Hashem has promised good things to Israel. But he replied, I will not go. I would rather go back to my own country and to my own kinsmen. Moshe commanded, please do not leave us, Cush, and know that we have to camp in the desert, and you can serve us, and you can serve as our eyes. If you do go with us, then whatever Hashem does for us, we will do the same for you.
Okay, so what happens, it's the story where it's a little bit unclear, but it seems like somebody is leaving the camp. Moshe is entreating someone to leave the camp, but they choose to leave the camp. Who is this person?
Yisro.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I looked at the whole source. I didn't see the word Yitro anywhere. Right, what's the guy's name?
Well, here it's Chovav, right.
Okay, Chovav. Now, what Dr. Schreier said is very intuitive because I think he said that it's Yitro. Right? First of all, because we have Moshe's in-law here, and second of all, because I think many people were brought up, or they're at least familiar with the Rashi, quoting the Medrash, that says all these people, right, Yitro, Yeter, Chol, Ken, etc., the 7 names are all Yitro, which is a very nice Midrash. But, right, let's just take a step back and see just on the level of shot what's going on, right? Moshe winds up in the area of Midian, tending sheep for a guy named, in the beginning, in the beginning? Reuel. Yeah. Guy named Reuel. Guy named Reuel has a son named, or 2 sons, one of whom is named Chovav, and the other whom is named. It's not a trick question. There's only one person left. Yitro, yes. Yes. So, what seems to be going on, at least on a level of shot, is you can say Chovav and Yitro are the same person. It's possible. But it seems like Reuel is an important person. He's a Kohen Midian. He apparently dies. Who takes over as the Kohen Midian and takes over the sheep? Yitro, right? Yitro takes over. Now it says Chotain Moshe. What does the word Chotain mean?
Father-in-law.
Why does it mean father-in-law? How do you know it means father-in-law? So there is 1 or 2 other places in Tanakh, but it's not used that often. What's the source of the word?
Well, like chatana.
Right, from chatana it means, from chora chatan, from chatuna, wedding, right? It means your in-laws, right? Presumably any relationship that's an in-law is your mechutan, right? Your mechutan doesn't necessarily mean your father-in-law. It can mean your brother-in-law, it can mean your sister-in-law, etc. So what happens, we have Yitro is presumably on a level of pshat, right? On the level of Drash's father-in-law, on the level of pshat it seems like it's his brother-in-law. Now Yitro is Kohen Midian, right? He's an important guy, he's got stuff to do, right? Come Parshat Yitro, right? Come before we have the giving of the Torah, and it seems like Yitro leaves. Again, it's a little bit unclear. Some people try and move it around and say it wasn't quite there. All right, not important for our purposes, but it seems like Yitro leaves the camp. Who stays behind in the camp? His less important, presumably, brother Chovav, right? Now time for Chovav to take his lead. As far as we know, Chovav is the last remaining of the in-laws of Moshe, who, the relatives of Tzipora, who are hanging around. Why is this so significant? Well, remember what happened when Yitro first showed up. That's source 8. I think we're up to you. Source 8.
Now Yitro, a priest of Midian, an in-law of Moshe, heard about all that God had done for Moshe and for Israel, his people, how Hashem had brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moshe had sent away his wife Zipporah and her 2 sons, Yitro, Moshe's in-law, had taken them.
Okay, now that is a very loaded pasuk there, pasuk 2, right? Yitro shows up with Zipporah and the children, and what does it say in pasuk 2? Moshe had sent them away, and Yitro had taken them. Why are those such loaded terms? What do the words sending away and taking mean when it comes to male-female relationships in the Torah?
Divorcing and marriage.
Divorce and marriage, right? Now, presumably it doesn't mean he married his sister, but you can certainly read this to mean, right? Moshe divorced his wife, and Yitro had taken the place in terms of the sustainer and the provider, right? She went back to her family, right? We have sort of this idea by root, even when Naomi says, go back to your families, right? You no longer have husbands, you no longer have someone to support you. I can't support you. Go back to your family so that somebody is supporting you, right? So, what's the issue? The issue is, did Moshe actually divorce his wife, either literally or figuratively in some way, prior to going down to Egypt? He certainly separated from her. Why would he divorce her? Or, again, whether formally or informally, why would he do that? Because
He had other work to do.
okay, he had other work to do, but lots of people have other work to do. They don't divorce their wives over that.
Maybe he's taking another wife.
Dangerous.
Oh, okay, maybe he's planning on taking possibly, but why would he do? I mean, presumably that wasn't his intent at the time, right?
Maybe it was dangerous.
Okay, great. Why is it dangerous? He's going to Egypt. What's the deal with Egypt and Moshe?
He's a wanted man.
Right. So, right. Moshe's told the people who want to kill him have all died out. But first of all, it's still a dangerous spot for him. And second of all, he's about to openly challenge Paro. Right. Paro is not the world's nicest guy, and he's certainly not above going after people's families.
But Zipporah and the kids were they were on the road.
Zipporah and his kids, we know they're on the road, but it seams like that they went back. Right. They're not in Egypt. Right. They're now rejoining him. And right. Let's say, so why not just leave things be? Or I'm taking a sabbatical. I'll be back in 6 months or a year. Well, right, if something happens to Moshe, exactly. She's in a situation where she's hanging out in Midian going, where's my husband? Is my husband home? I haven't seen him in 6 months. I haven't seen him in a year. I haven't seen him in 5 years. Is he dead? Is he in a jail somewhere? Right, the only thing we know about Paro is what does he like doing with people he doesn't like, right? At least the previous Paro from Bereshit. Right? He likes throwing him in jail. So to avoid that situation, right? Again, not so clear, but it certainly makes sense that something, whether formal or informal, happened. So here's the question. What is the status between Moshe and Zipporah at this point? Right? It is very unclear. What do we have now? Right? As long as Yitro is there and as long as Chovav is there, the status between Moshe and Zipporah is somewhat unclear. Is she there with Yitro's family or is she there as Moshe's wife? And when Yitro leaves, Chovav is still there. What happens after Chovav leaves? By process of elimination, right? 2 minus 1 equals, right? Moshe's wife.
But maybe
right?
she'd be going with them.
Sorry?
Maybe she'd be going with them.
Well, we know that, it seems like we know that she's not, right? That's the point, right? Chovav leaves, Zipporah stays. So, any question as to the status of Zipporah has now been cleared up. We know that Zipporah is remaining with Moshe. They are living as man and wife.
It says specifically that she stays?
Well, it doesn't say that she goes. I'm trying to remember if there's a specific incident involving her after this point, and I honestly do not recall.
You never hear much about her.
Right, that's true.
I thought she went back with them because he
That's
had
true,
to have
but-
prophecy all the time and couldn't have
Well,
it.
but again, that's incorporating the Medrash from Rashi that says that they were separated. But there's never an indication that she leaves. We're told that she comes, right? We're told that Yitro comes. We obviously know that Chovav comes. We're told that Yitro leaves, and we're told that Chovav leaves, but we're never told that she leaves.
Yeah, but he also never greets her. When she comes, when it says Yitro comes with her, he greets Yitro.
And I think that contributes to the question of status. I
But
agree
if
with
that's
that.
the only thing it says, and then never mentions her again, then I don't think we can say, well, it never said she
No,
left.
it's not. She's mentioned after that. She's mentioned after that in terms of being Moshe's wife and having children. Yes, that.
But not in terms of her presence there or her doing anything.
Not in terms of her presence there, not in terms of her doing anything. I think that is
so I just
correct.
think it's sort of,
but,
I don't think we can say, well, it doesn't say she left if it also doesn't say she stayed. Like, I just think that.
Right, but it says she arrived. It specifically says she arrived, and it never says she left, and it says that everybody else left. So again, you can. There's room there. There's room there,
One of the
but
reasons why Yitro came, to bring Tzipporah?
Yes, that is one of the reasons why he came. He specifically says, "Ve'ishtacha u'shnei banayim." So that...
Well, the fact that he calls her Ishtacha.
Right, exactly. That's certainly true, right? Yitro is certainly saying, right, as far as I'm concerned, right, you separated from her for your safety and for her safety, and the danger is past, and she can return to being your wife. That's clearly what Yitro is expressing. What we don't know, both from Moshe's actions at the time and even from later on, is whether or not this actually came to be. And I think that this story is coming to clear that up, although you can take umbrage at that.
That Rashi said, I don't know whether separated what that means, but he had this thing about Zipporah that if they are prophesying stuff like that, then the wives will have to separate from them. And Zipporah said something. Zipporah heard this, said, woe to their wives if they are
In the Midrash.
but they will separate from their wives.
Right. So again, midrashically, right.
Yeah.
Right. So midrashically, it seems like separate meaning to not have marital relations, not live with a man and wife, because you never know when Hashem will come and speak. Okay. Now, and again, I'm just suggesting that as an idea. It certainly, I think it supports the idea that that the Isha Kushite is Tzipporah, but it still doesn't explain why she's called an Isha Kushite and not just called Tzipporah, or at least at some point explained. Okay. Now, great, because if you want to say, we understand why Miriam and Aaron would be talking about it at this point, because it's something that just happened, but what's the deal with the Isha Kushite? So I think perhaps to take an approach, we can look at it in context. I think we're running out of time, so we're not going to have a chance to read all of source 9. But what we have in source 9 is the context, which is the previous chapter. What happened in the previous chapter? The people are crying out, right? The people are saying, oh, we want meat, etc. Generally, they're unhappy. Moshe gets very upset. Moshe says, I can't carry these people anymore. I can't do it by myself. The burden is too much for me to do it alone. What does Hashem say? Appoint for yourself, right? Appoint 70 leaders, right? Appoint the 70 elders. And what happens? The spirit that rests with you will be transferred onto them, and they'll be able to help you out. What happens? We're then told that there were these two men who stayed in the camp, Eldad and Medad, and the spirit came to rest on them also, right? They're not from the 70 elders. What happens? Moshe gets told, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, right? They have nevuah, they're spreading their nevuah in the camp. Yehoshua gets very upset, and Yehoshua says, right, Adoni Moshe, kill la'im. Moshe, stop them, shut them up, right? Shut up, literally, right? Put them in jail. What happens? Moshe says, what, you're trying to protect me? Right? I wish everyone would be like this. Right? Oh, it'd be wonderful if only everybody had the spirit of Hashem, if everyone could prophesize. So what's going on here? Why is Yehoshua getting so upset? It's not that they're false prophets, right? Nobody thinks they're false prophets. Everyone, right? If they were false prophets, Moshe would not say, oh, it's all so wonderful. So why is Yehoshua getting so upset? What's Moshe's reaction? What's the argument that the two of them are having?
Political leadership.
Sorry? Political leadership. Moshe just handed over to 70 other people, right? So there's something unique about Eldad and Medad. Right? Something about Eldad and Medad that we have never seen before in the last, since Moshe was born. What happens? For the first time since, the Pasuk Aleph of the book of Shemot, Hashem is prophesying to someone who is not either A, Moshe, or B, someone appointed by Moshe. Right? Everybody else, right, Moshe's. Right, so here's the thing. We never actually see. It's true, it says, Miriam says, right, Hashem speaks to us, and no one seems to contradict that. Oh, we don't really have a nevuah of Miriam. I mean, we sort of have Az Yashir, which is, okay, it doesn't say, Vaydaber Hashem el Miriam lemor, and it never says Vaydaber Hashem el Miriam lemor. It seems like Miriam is a prophetess. Right? Aaron, Hashem never speaks to Aaron until he becomes Kohen Gadol. How does he become Kohen Gadol? Moshe appoints him, right? These 70 elders, they have prophecy, or they have the Spirit resting on them, whatever that necessarily means. When does that happen? When Moshe appoints them. right? Nobody prophesizes until they are touched by the hand of Moshe, and Moshe is touched by the hand of God.
But in the English, I don't know how accurate, they said they were among those listed to go out to the tent. It must be
Right,
that
so it says,
Moshe appointed
right, it
them.
says Hema Ba Kitzuvim, right? They were amongst the written. What exactly that means, midrashically, and perhaps even as a matter of shot, it means that there was a list of people who could have been among the 70 elders, right? They were among, right, especially if you work it out, right, 70 doesn't go so well into 12 tribes, right? 72 works a lot better. And once you say, oh, if you wanted to have equal representation, you would have 72, but we wound up in the end with 70, and then there are these two extra people who wind up with prophecy, right? It doesn't take a great leap for people to say, oh, what must have happened is, right, the Midrashim to this effect, many Mefarshim to this effect, what must have happened is, there were 72 people who were appointed, or who were shortlisted to be on the list. God only said 70, so two people, what are you going to do, right? They get a lot off the list, and yet somehow these two people, despite not being appointed by Moshe, right, it shows that they were worthy and on the level of the other 70 of their own merit, right? These aren't just two Joe Schmoes who are hanging around, but despite not being appointed by Moshe, they nonetheless still are prophesied.
But they were appointed.
No, they weren't, because Moshe only gives of his spirit to the 70 elders.
Right, but it says here, they were among the 70.
So, no, it doesn't say they were among the 70.
Well, they were among those listed to go out
Right,
to the tent, and that's what...
Yeah, no, they were, right, so they were among those who were listed, but they were not among the 70, right?
Well, it sounds like that to me.
So if you notice, I skipped, for conservation of time, I skipped from 17 to 26, right? The 70 aren't in the camp at this time. Right, so that's how we know they're not in the camp. The 70 are not in the camp. Eldad and Medad are there, and that's why Moshe and Yeshua a runner comes and tells them what's going on. Right, there's a gap. Moshe, Aaron, and the 70 elders are outside of the camp by the Aaron doing, this transformation or doing this transference, and back in the camp are Eldad and Medad. Right, so we know they're not among the 70. So what's going on? What's Yehoshua so concerned about? What's Yehoshua so, why is he so upset? Why is he concerned? Yehoshua's take is, this is a political disaster. Up until now, Moshe, you have been completely indispensable. You're the one who speaks to God. Anyone else who wants to speak to God, they need to go through you. When everybody has a complaint, they talk to you. And you appointed judges and things, right, so people who can interpret the law, but nobody gave them special sanctity to the point where when you left the people and the people thought you were gone, there was a disaster. But what did they do? They appointed a metal calf, right? They made an object and started worshiping it because there's nobody else to replace you. Now all of a sudden there are people to replace you, and what's going to happen? People are going to get big ideas. People are going to go around saying, oh, well, we don't need Moshe anymore. Everybody can be holy. What's Moshe's response to this? Fantastic! That's exactly the way it's supposed to be. What, you think I should be unique and you think I should be special? No, everyone should be me. It would be wonderful if everyone would be me. It would be wonderful if everybody talked to God. So, and my argument would be that this particular argument, this discussion between Moshe and Yehoshua this is the argument that defines the book of Bamidbar. The question of, do you say Moshe is unique, Moshe is the leader, and if you have anybody challenging that authority, you have disaster? Or do you say, no, everyone should strive to be Moshe, and that's a good thing, and everyone benefits from this? Now, who wins this argument? I'm not tossing this open to discussion because we have the rest of the book of Bamidbar to learn, but I think it's clear to say both sides have a couple of victories and a couple of defeats over the course of the book. Right? When we finish the book of Bamidbar, we can look back and we can see, how well everybody did. But this is the fundamental machloket. And what happens right off the bat, right after the discussion, what's the first thing we see? Somebody's chipping away at the uniqueness of Moshe. And specifically, who is it? It's Miriam and Aaron, right? What's going on? Why are they so upset? I think we can understand why, right? They're going around, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Eldad and Medad, the Misnah and Barachana, there's this whole, and they're thinking there, what are we, Swiss cheese? Right? We're Misnabe all the time. Right? God speaks to us too, right? Why is everybody saying, oh, well, this isn't good, right? Moshe is unique, the Eldad and Medad can't do this. Miriam and Aaron are prophets as well. So, if we take that in mind, I think we see perhaps that there's an issue here, which is that Miriam and Aaron have this question, right? Why is Moshe's prophecy qualitatively different from our prophecy? And what's the thing about this question? It's actually a perfectly fair question, inherently. If you were to ask the question, you were to say, I don't get it. What's the big deal? There's lots of prophets. Sure, Moshe's a prophet, but Miriam and Aaron are prophets as well, right? That question, in and of itself, right? Should you get punished for that?
It's not realistic, because Moshe went up to Har Sinai. There were already so many differences in their levels.
Well, Moshe went up to Sinai. Who else went up to Har Sinai? Aaron also goes up to Har Sinai. The Tachat Raglav Timasei Levnat HaSapir, right? They see this image of God, right? And it's true. Moshe goes up for 40 days and 40 nights. It's true. But what they're saying is, okay, so Moshe has had, extra experiences, but we're both prophets. Okay, so he gets more prophecy. But ultimately, God speaks to him. God speaks to us. What's the issue? It's true that inherently that question can be asked in an intellectually curious way. And that's not a problem. What is the problem? If you're asking that question not in an intellectually curious way, but if you're asking that question as an attack on Moshe, well, what's so great about Moshe? We're just as good. If you're asking it that way, that's a problem. How do we know that it's the second way and not the first way? Because they're talking about the Kushite wife of Moshe. That's how we know, because they're starting to, if you're doing that now, who's talking about the Kushite wife of Moshe? The question is, isn't Moshe a prophet? Are we also a prophet? That Aaron and Miriam both asked. The question of the Kushite wife of Moshe, who asked that? Only Miriam. Vatidaber. It only says, right, and again, I'm not sure about the translation, I apologize for that, but in the Hebrew, feminine, singular, Miriam, it says Vatidaber, Miriam ve'Aaron b'Moshe, but it says Miriam and Aaron, but the verb that gets used is the feminine singular, it's just Miriam. What happens? So what happens? It seems like Aaron and Miriam don't know about the nature of Moshe's prophecy. They don't know that he's qualitatively better. Why not? Right? If you got a special discussion from God, wouldn't you be going around telling everybody?
No, because he's so humble.
Moshe is the most humble man. He never told anyone, so they don't know. Right? Miriam and Aaron genuinely don't know that. So what's the punishment for? The punishment for it's not for the question. The issue is, why did you say the part of the Kushite? So, because Miriam said, I'm going to criticize Moshe on a personal level because his wife has very, very dark skin, what's the punishment? God says, you don't like very, very dark skin? I'll give you white skin, the whitest skin anybody's ever seen. How do you like that? So, exactly. So, with that, hopefully we have an approach that helps us understand all this, and it is now time for Mincha, and so we will end. If there are questions, people can certainly come and approach me after Mincha.